Welcome to the Work in Progress podcast. This is a space where we want to create conversations around things that actually matter. Thanks for joining us today. We hope these words encourage you to know that no matter where we are in our journeys, we're all still a work in progress.
What's up, podcast fam? We are back for another episode of Work in Progress. We are joined by a special guest today. We have Aaron first. Aaron is still here. He has not been fired. Matter of fact, he is exceeding expectations, I would say. No, he's crushing it. We've got Aaron here with us. Daniel, I'm back. And today we have actually our lead pastor at Awaken Church, the one, the only, Ryan Cavender.
Well, don't do that to me now.
I was trying to think of the middle name, but I forgot. So
It's Lee. No, I'm just kidding.
There's two middle names. We don't have time for that.
That's long. That's long. Yeah. Hey, today we are just, we told you from the very beginning, we want to invite guests into this. And so if you're a fan of the podcast and you want to be a guest, reach out to Aaron's agent and we'll see if we can get you on here. Okay.
That's my wife.
That's right.
That's my wife.
That's his wife. And if you don't have her number, too bad. You're not getting on the show.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we are kicking off today's episode and I think Aaron is running the show.
Give me this, bro. Give me this. All right. You guys smell that?
Oh,
Smell what?
Authenticity.
Ooh.
I can smell that from a mile away, man.
What does that smell like?
It smells real. Sometimes you don't want to smell it, but it's what you need to smell.
Oh my gosh.
And so
That's good.
rolling into that, man, that's what this conversation will be about today is authentic faith, how to live authentically, and what that looks like for you guys, how you think of it. So right off the bat, I really believe that subconsciously I do get a really strong feel for if somebody's being authentic or not. We're watching Survivor right now, me and my wife.
That show's still on.
It's still on. They're still going strong. We just watched season 41. Season 42 is coming out soon in the spring.
Gosh.
We got addicted. That's not why we're here though. But watching that show has given me it's weird, right? Because obviously they have to play the game. They have to be fake. And some of them like, I'm being real honest with you right now. And as a viewer, you could see like, oh, like I know what they just told that other person over there. It's cringe, man. I don't know why we're still watching it. It's super cringe. It's not fun. But man, in real life, I feel like it's the same way. It's the same way, right? You can really tell when somebody's being true, their true self, how they act when doors are closed, how they act, maybe not necessarily like in the privacy of just them and their wife, but like their full characters coming out almost at all times. I think there's few times when that can vary. When you first meet somebody, you're not at a 10, right? But you're also not like, you're not faking anything either, you know? And so like for me growing up, that's always been a big thing. I've always noticed it. And I think that's one of my gifts. I've been able to be authentic with whoever it is that I come across. And for some reason, people open up to me. That's just one of my giftings and it's a blessing. So leading off with that, I just wanted to know kind of like growing up for you guys, like what did that look like for you? Was that like a thing you noticed? Is looking back, can you tell that you cared about authenticity? Or was that something that kind of was a little lost in the culture, a little lost in the leadership at the time? And how did you deal with that growing up?
Yeah, I think for me, I didn't see a whole lot of authenticity growing up. At least I don't think I did. I grew up at a mega church, you know, and so from the church perspective, in terms of what authentic faith looked like, I didn't see it. Everybody wore their Sunday best. I literally went to church in a glass cathedral.
Oh, wow.
You know, and so it was definitely a unique way to grow up, and I saw people that would just put on kind of that facade. And so I don't think I saw really authentic faith until I was well into my teens, maybe even into college, where I saw people like actually coming and being real about the problems they were going through. And so that was, it was hard for me to like rectify with what's in scripture, right? Because you see authentic faith over and over again in the Gospels, but you know, I wasn't really seeing it in real life.
Yeah.
That's really good. I think I saw some of the same stuff. I did not go to a mega church, but I went to a church that was bigger. Had a couple services. I don't know what's the difference between a regular church and mega church. I was just somewhere in a normal sized church, I guess. And I think I was always drawn to the people that I knew were being authentic. Like, you know, I had really good pastors and stuff when I was growing up. I had really good people in our church who were like really good leaders. But it was always like I was always drawn to leaders or pastors who were authentic and would talk about the things that they struggle with, which wasn't always the case. Which, yeah, I've always been drawn to it, but I don't think it was always evident like in the churches that I grew up in.
How did you identify it?
I mean, I think the same way that like people identify it now. It's like, right, if you go up there and say that you're a perfect person, you never struggle with anything, we all know that's a lie.
Yeah.
So if you're not like open and honest about like, oh man, I'm struggling with this, or, yeah, I guess that's the way I would tell. And like you get to know people like in relationships and you hang out and you see them outside of a Sunday morning, or you see them like on a Tuesday night and you see them on a Saturday, or they would come to like basketball games and you'd see them like you would see them outside of the walls of the church. I think you begin to see like, oh, you're the same person that you are on Sundays.
Yeah.
Or you're not the same person that you are on Sundays. Or like, I know like one thing that always drove me insane, but then of course, like I did the same thing, was like going to school with people that would go to my church. And I remember in high school, like, yeah, you would go to like church and do youth group, and then you see those same people like at school and you're like, yeah, you're not the same at all that you are on Wednesday. And then of course, like I fell into the same trap. I would do the same thing. I would be different than Sunday, and Wednesday would be different Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So
yeah, absolutely. So that's interesting because I grew up in the Catholic Church. It's very legalistic in terms, right? Like there's a very tight schedule. You show up, you get in your pew. Nobody really talks, unless you already know them going in.
Yeah.
Your family. But once service starts, usually pretty quiet, a lot of reverence. And then after the fact, you get out. So I didn't really have the chance to be authentic or see any authenticity there because it's really quiet. It's honestly very quiet. Not a strong sense of community. After church, they would hold some events like where you'd pay a quarter, go get a donut and get some milk and stuff. And of course, I mean, I was eating, so I didn't care who was being authentic or not. But I think growing up and getting into the high school phases of my days, I started to see the people who went to specifically non-denominational churches, and then there would be times where they're acting different, similar to what you guys experienced, but they post, like social media has always been present in my life, right? Like since middle school.
What a youngster.
Middle school and up. So not always.
I remember MySpace. Don't act like I'm not that.
Middle school and up. Okay. Give me that. Not always. We're 97, dude. 97. But anyways, like I noticed like a radical shift, and it wasn't something that I was with them all the time. So I noticed, but it was visible, right?
Yeah.
I'd show up at school, it'd be kind of trouble or just not Christ-like, And then on Sundays, there'd be posts, there'd be like youth group events where they're like, oh man, I accepted Christ, all this stuff. And then it's right back to the same thing. And so growing in now being in a leadership position in the church, how do you think, or I guess what would you do to combat that now? Like, how do you guys stay authentic and model that for the younger generation? Because I know for me that impacted me. I almost didn't want to go to a non-denom church because I saw how drastic the shift was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you touched on something there. You mentioned that word Christ-like. And I think there's a difference really, because what we were talking about just a second ago is really just plain authenticity, right? It's just being real. But like an authentic faith is being Christ-like.
Yeah.
Anybody can be real, but if you're like truly Christ-like, that results in an authentic faith, which to me like is when you exhibit the fruits of the Spirit, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. I think I got them all.
Let's go.
You know what I mean? But like, that's like, in my mind, like, you have like a certificate of authenticity, right? Like on like a, signed memorabilia or whatever, said like, this is authentic. And so for me, for us as church leaders, it's like, okay, how can we be authentic, be living out authentic faith? Well, it's by exhibiting the fruits of the Spirit. That's like our certificate of authenticity. That makes sense.
No, it does. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. I think one thing that I get to, most of the time when I'm talking to people, it's to students, young adults like you that are younger, that had MySpace or post MySpace and social media their whole life. And I think man, it's just like being honest about, like, I'm not perfect. but I'm working and striving every day, just like I hope that whoever I'm talking to is doing the same thing. And I think just like letting that be known that like I've told several students this in our life here at our church is like, there's going to be a point where there's something that I say or do that's going to let you down, but I am a flawed individual. And so like, don't look at me. Like, don't come to church because of me. Like, don't be a part of this because of me. Like, come be here because we're chasing after the same thing. Like we're going to chase after Jesus. We're going to look to mold ourselves and to be more like Christ every day. And so that way, like when I mess up, because I mess up, like when I mess up, you're not completely like broken because I'm not the reason why you're here. Like you're here to chase after Jesus and he's not going to ever let you down. So I think that's something that like you can be really open and honest because I think like your generation, I know your generation like values that authenticity, like maybe the most. That's like what they value the most. That's what they crave the most, especially like in a church setting. I think that's probably their biggest complaint. He's like, oh, I don't go to church because they're inauthentic or it's not real or whatever. And so I think how you combat that is you just like, here, okay, like let's talk about it. Like, let's be open and honest and like let's walk through this faith journey together.
Yeah.
So
off of that point right there, I have people that I know that use that as an excuse. Where's the line when it comes to authenticity, right? Like, where's the line when it comes to somebody who may be trying to find a church and they're like, well, I just can't find the one where that has the right thing, or like the right pastor that's authentic, or the right thing for me. You know what I mean? Like I've experienced that somewhat in my recent life. And so I'm like, I get the authenticity point, right? There has to be some authenticity there with the people who are in leadership. But like, when does it become a crutch? When does it become the point to where it's withholding you from, you know what I mean?
What do you think?
I mean, I think what you tell people, and I've had this conversation before, is like, how do I put this in a way that's, if you're coming to church to look for perfect people, then yeah, don't come. Like we're not going to be perfect. It's like, right. They're like, oh, well, they're inauthentic. It's like, well, are you being authentic by like, is that really the reason why you're not showing up? Right. Is that really the reason why you're not chasing after Jesus, is because like, oh, the Christians are inauthentic? If that's the case, then like that's a different conversation to have. And so I know there's even people in like my own family that will say like, oh, I don't go to church because it's just like, they're hypocrites. Like I don't want to be. And it's like, well, I'm sure if you went to McDonald's, right, there's hypocrites that work there, but it doesn't stop you from going and eating a burger or whatever. And so it's like, man, if that's really the reason why you're not coming to church to learn more about Jesus, whew.
I mean, the reality is there's going to come a day where we stand before Jesus, and I don't think he's going to be okay with the excuse that, I didn't follow you because, those other people weren't doing it right.
Yeah.
And so it takes a personal responsibility. And that's why, at least at Awaken, we always talk about being the church. Well, hey, yeah, there's probably a line somewhere where maybe that church, maybe you should find a different place. But for most people, like, we're called to be a part of that church. And so if that culture maybe isn't as authentic as you'd like it to be, why not stay there and be a part of building that culture?
That's good. Yeah, I like that. And I think it's been a recent topic at Awaken specifically is, if you feel as if there's a missing piece,
be the piece.
Be the piece.
Yeah.
And that's, for some reason, and I'm the body of Christ. I'm part of the congregation. I'm part of all that. I didn't think of that, not as if I would have or I should have, but like it clicked when you said it. It's like, yeah, of course. Like, why would somebody else create that? Like, if you're just waiting on it, right? That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Be the one that makes it happen. Yeah. And I think that's important for people to hear because it's not like you don't have to wait for it. Even if you just started going to a church, you see like, hey, there's not a young adults ministry there. There's not a youth ministry here. Start it, do that for the next generation. Don't be a sideline, a bench player.
Yeah.
Be participating and be active in it. That's awesome.
I think but like before you move on, I think too, like when you are craving authenticity, when you share your heart, like when you share your downfalls, when you share like your most authentic self, it allows others to be authentic as well. And so I remember a couple weeks back, I was talking to a high schooler, in a different city, a different church. And she was like literally talking about like, I don't cry. Like I don't cry. And she was getting emotional at something, like spiritually emotional, not like angry at somebody like that, not that emotional, but, and she's talking about like, I just don't want to cry. Like, I just don't want to cry. She's like, nobody ever sees me cry. And I told her like, hey, like you allowing yourself to do that because you feel like you're overwhelmed by this emotion, it's going to free up somebody else to not hold back. Right. And the same thing goes for like authenticity. Like you being your most authentic self allows the freedom for somebody else to be their most authentic self. And so, yeah, you need more of that. You need more people instead of saying like, nope, not going to be authentic. They're not going to be authentic. So I'm out. What if you were authentic and allowed others to then go and be their most authentic selves?
It's good.
So,
yeah, that's awesome. This is cool, man. Like
you're authentic, awesome. Aaron.
You guys are being real, and I
authentic,
can tell.
Aaron.
I like that. I like that. Do you guys, as men, as humans who are flawed and in leadership positions, do you guys feel a pressure when it comes to being like a fully authentic person, living your faith in that light, but also leading people, being the front of the pack and showing by example? Like, is there a pressure that comes with that?
I think for me, I wouldn't say it's a pressure. I just think it's just an awareness of perception. Yeah, I mean, the reality is I can't change who I am.
Yeah.
I could be honest about who I am. But I think it goes back to what Daniel said, right? It's like the more authentic I can be, whether it's from stage or in life group or even just in kind of one-on-one conversations, like the more that people are going to get out of it. So for me, it's more of like it's honestly a motivation, right? To open up, to share about my shortcomings, knowing that's going to help somebody else. If I'm just up there just talking about all the good things I've done or how holy I am or whatever, like that's not going to help anybody.
Yeah.
And so really it's more of a motivation for me. I don't really feel the pressure as much.
Yeah. Perception is a good word. I don't know if I feel the pressure, but I'm also like how we do things here is like, we're allowed, like you're in life group with everybody else. Like we're not set apart from, like leadership isn't set apart from like the normal air quote, like person that comes to church. Like we get to be in life group. We get to have conversations. We get to be in discipleship relationships with people. And so it's not like you have this pressure of like, what happens? It's like we're in it. People know that I'm flawed. People know that I'm like not perfect, and they're walking in this journey with me. So like, I don't know if there's a pressure to that, but
I think that's important too, because even in the way that we try to set up like our church governance lends to that. We don't have like a senior pastor top down model. I mean, you're leading the life group that I'm a part of, right?
Shout out to that life group. Right. If you need a life group Monday nights.
But you know what I mean? Like we don't make it all about me or all about our pastors. Yeah, it's about raising up others, and there's ways to take that pressure off of us, but also to, like we talked about with the body, to share the wealth, to share the opportunities.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And man, I don't remember which book. Was it the book we're reading where it talks about we are all the body of Christ, but some people are the foot.
Oh yeah.
Some people are the hand. Yeah. I think that kind of ties into that, right? Where like being your authentic self is not saying like, well, I know that my giftings are to be like the hand and feet of Jesus, right? Like to go do some actual work, but I'm going to try to put myself as the mouthpiece.
Yeah.
Because that's where I feel like I should be, right? I think that kind of sums up like an image of authenticity is like not trying to squeeze into a space where you don't fit, right? And being your true authentic self, living that true authentic faith allows you to be even that much better at the giftings that you've been given, and it frees people up to do the mouthpiece, to be the bicep, to be the whatever it is. That's awesome, man. You guys are cool. You know that?
Well,
yeah.
That's about yourself, man.
Wow. No, that's awesome, man. So when it comes to living a fully authentic faith, how do you go about that with people outside of the church? Cause there's a point in my mind where I'm like, I don't want to be too pushy, right? Even though maybe I'll say like a prayer before my food at home. Maybe I won't when I'm with a group of friends. Like, how do you guys navigate that? Like authenticity like that? And I know that's all kind of one thing, but I think that there's some fear there, right? Sometimes that's me. Sometimes I'm like, maybe we shouldn't pray like around family or like people who aren't necessarily as close, but maybe that's where my authenticity fails, right? Maybe that's where it's not present. Or so what are your thoughts on that? Give me some advice on that, because I need some.
I think if you pray at your house and not out, are you really being authentic? Number one. Mm-hmm. But it is hard. Like there's like times like where we take a lot of meetings in coffee shops, right? And it's like somebody is talking about spiritual stuff, and you always notice like people are like looking over, and like, sometimes things get a little bit more amped up. Like they get like start talking louder and louder. And there's always like this thought in the back of my head of like, oh, I wonder what they think. But it really does. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. But I think to speak to how do you do that? So my wife and I had the opportunity to, we serve at an apartment complex where we throw events and do stuff like that with the hope and the desire that we can have spiritual conversations with our neighbors. Right. And so how you do that is like, I won't say all the time, we strive to pray before every event, for God to like allow these little moments in our conversations where we can direct them into some kind of spiritual Jesus avenue. And I say, we always shoot, to pray, and then sometimes you get crazy and then you don't. And you always notice the events where we're prayed up and ready, and the ones that aren't, because like you're prayed up and ready, and you're going to notice like, oh yeah, God opened that door for you to have a conversation about basketball that turned into a story, that turned into a connection at church, that turned into like, man, you're able to talk about Jesus in some way. And I think that's like the key, is like just being open and aware of the conversations that you're having. Cause God's giving us opportunity in all of our conversations to point back to him somehow, if we are prayed and like actually looking out for those things. And so I don't think you necessarily like have to think in this lane of like, here at church or here at my house. And then with family, I think like the authentic thing is like, I'm blending the two together. Like I am being my most authentic self. Like Jesus is my number one priority. And that doesn't change when I'm with people who don't believe, because right, if you're living like Christ, you're going to love them well. You're going to serve them. You're going to do all the things that, I mean, how they can be angry at you because you asked if you can pray for them. Mm-hmm. Like I've never met a single person that has turned down an offer to pray for them. Yep. And so I would just encourage you in that of like, man, it is hard. Like there's going to be like these little thoughts in your head of like, oh, what are they going to think of me? Who cares what they think of you? Yeah. Easier said than done, I know, but who cares?
But like you said, I think they do want to hear it, man. I read a stat, I think today, it said like 77% of Gen Z are at least curious about who Jesus is, right? And so I think for me, it's like, no, just be bold about it. What's the worst that can happen? But I do think the one thing I wanted to say is, we tend to overemphasize like the proclamation piece when it comes to evangelism, not just in the church, but just in general, right? We think that we need to always be like talking about it. But the reality is that true evangelism is proclamation and it's demonstration. So oftentimes the best way we can share the gospel with somebody is by serving them, by acting Christ-like around them. That'll lead to those conversations. It doesn't always have to be straight out the gates with the proclamation of the gospel, though that's not a bad way to go. Yeah,
that's good. That's really good. I think for me personally, whenever I get this like fire for something, like, this is the first thing that works, right? My mouth, and then maybe my actions follow up. Hopefully, right? Hopefully my actions will come through. Sometimes they don't. But I think that's important for me to hear, and important probably for other people too listening. That's like actions, right? Serving is a good word, right? Serve as Jesus would serve, right? And I think that's truly authentic. And then also, you'll probably work up the boldness and the courage to share. That's good though. I needed that.
For future podcasts, we need to, this is going to be an idea. We're going to write it down. How to share your faith. And I think it's like you said, it's a mix of both. It's a mix of talking and doing. Yeah. And so make a note, write that down. I got it. Your faith. We're going to talk about it.
Last question.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be authentic to you guys? We kind of just like picked at it, but like to wrap up, like what does that mean to you to be authentic, fully authentic faith? It's kind of a tough question.
I can hop in first. I think for me, it goes to Romans 12:2, I believe it is. Don't be conformed to the ways of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. for me, it's continually going back to that, not living with the ways of the world, but continually going to prayer and to the word, to community of believers, that your mind is continually transformed to look more like Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story to answer your question. How about that?
Nice.
I can't remember if it was junior or senior year of high school. It's a long time ago, obviously. I'd gone to church my whole life, and most people like at my high school that I interacted with, they knew that I would go to church, and like it was no big deal. But I remember this one girl that I sat next to in an English class. I said something that wasn't very Christ-like, and she looked at me and she's like, "I thought you went to church."
Woo.
And that's a wake-up call, and I don't ever want that to happen again. And so like when I think of authentic faith, it's the opposite of that. Like it's living in every moment and every opportunity that whatever I'm doing reflects back on Jesus. Like that's it. Like that's the goal. And so I'm not perfect at it. Obviously none of us are. But that's the goal, is to it not be a different me on Sunday morning, Wednesday night. Like it's the same me all the time. And that me is somebody who is looking more and more like Christ, like striving to look more like Christ. So
yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, thanks guys. I do want to say this though, before we wrap up, is that before I personally made the decision to dive headfirst into the community at Awaken, and honestly, just my faith, it took that authenticity from the people here in this community, from the leadership in this community. That's what it took for me, right? That was the turning point in my faith walk. And I saw people making commitments. I saw people asking to pray over people. I saw people following through and being genuine with everything they said. And it shifted something in my brain. I was like, whoa, these people, like, they do what they say they're gonna do. And that's them all the time. And so as just like a thank you to you guys, the leadership team, and just friends, like that's awesome. Appreciate that, guys, because that helped me in my personal faith journey. And hopefully that'll help somebody else through me, and so on and so forth. So
that's good, man.
Bro, behind the scenes, man, some of y'all don't know this, but like Aaron has made leaps and bounds, like living out this authentic faith. Like this whole thing, like this whole podcasting that we're doing stems from like this is his brain. Like this is how he does it. He did a podcast before and he's like, you know what? Like, this is it. Like, I want to share my faith. I want to be like, this is what I want to do. And so, man, props to you, dude.
Yeah.
Living it out, taking what you're learning and dissecting and living it out. So, it's awesome. It's awesome, man. All right. So the last thing that we do in our podcast, which we didn't prep Ryan on this, so this is going to be good. The last thing that we've been doing in our podcast is, highlighting a song, a book, a movie, a creator of some kind, an author, whatever, that is like creating media that gives glory to God that you have found interesting in the last couple weeks.
Okay.
So we'll give you a second to think about it. You said you had one. You're first.
I got a cool one, man. I actually learned it from these guys here. It's called Street Lights.
Nice.
There you go.
It's scripture with a hip hop beat behind it, like lo-fi beat. And it's really cool to listen to on a run or like a walk or when you're cleaning the house or whatever. It's really cool and it's vibey. So it's like, it keeps your attention. So that's mine. Street Lights.
That's good, man.
We'll link it in the show notes.
Get in the show
notes. All
right,
go for it.
Yeah, that's a hard one, man. But I'm going to give a shout out to my brother, Dr. Doug Lay. He and his wife, Paula, have a podcast called The Radical Christian Life. It's listen to me every time they've got a new one. I subscribe to it. I'm right on it. It talks a lot about discipleship, talks about what it looks like to live that radical Christian life. Definitely highly recommend it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I was looking for a creator and I found him. So there is a creator on Instagram. I don't know. I've met him virtually. Bright Cole. He's a fantastic creator on Instagram. We'll link his profile in there. He's awesome. As a matter of fact, the shirt that I'm wearing, he designed these for us. He designed our logo pack for our service event. Man, all of his stuff is legit. So he does a lot of like stuff for churches, obviously.
Graphic design,
but he also does just a lot of really cool like events and things that are happening. go give his page a follow.
Bright Cole.
It's all fire.
His stuff
all of
is
it awesome.
legit. He sent Daniel a bunch of stuff for this event, for that whole
Awesome,
brand.
dude.
And he's so good.
Awesome
at graphic
creator,
design.
but also a really good guy. So yeah, go give him a follow. He's got great stuff.
All right, guys. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do
First
it again.
guest on our Work in Progress podcast.
Honored.
Look at that.
Yes, sir. We'll do it again.
Later, guys.